Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is the verbatim federal courtroom testimony of Sean Diddy's trial as reported by Inner City Press. What happens when a man who controlled every aspect of his image for decades watches as his most private moments are displayed on screens throughout a federal courtroom? What did the security footage from Diddy's exclusive Caribbean island reveal that caused even seasoned court reporters to look away in shock? And why are prosecutors calling this evidence the smoking gun that cannot be explained away? In a federal courtroom where Sean Diddy Combs faces serious charges, prosecutors made an unexpected move that changed the entire atmosphere of the trial. Not with a surprise witness, not with financial records, but with hours of security footage from Diddy's private island, footage that Diddy himself didn't know had been preserved and obtained by investigators. And then the bombshell. As the first clips began playing on the courtroom monitors, Diddy's composed demeanor shattered completely. He lunged toward his attorneys, frantically whispering, then appeared to physically collapse in his chair, his head in his hands. What could possibly cause such a visceral reaction from a man who had maintained perfect control throughout weeks of damaging testimony? Why would someone as meticulous as Diddy install comprehensive security cameras throughout his most private property, recording not just the perimeter but intimate areas where his most exclusive gatherings took place? What did he believe would happen to this footage? And what exactly was captured that had his legal team immediately calling for a mistrial while Diddy himself seemed unable to even look at the screens? This isn't just another piece of evidence in a high-profile case. It's a rare moment when the carefully constructed facade of a powerful figure crumbles in real time. The full story, raw, unfiltered, begins with what those cameras recorded, and what they revealed will ensure you never see celebrity privacy the same way again. If you're finding this information valuable, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more breaking updates as this story continues to unfold. I'm standing outside the Manhattan Federal Courthouse where one of the most dramatic moments in recent legal history has just occurred. The atmosphere here remains charged with tension following what courtroom observers are describing as the moment everything changed in the trial of Sean Diddy Combs. What began as a seemingly routine day of evidence presentation transformed instantly when federal prosecutors announced they would be introducing security footage obtained from Diddy's private island in the Caribbean. The property, known to insiders as the Sanctuary, has been something of an open secret in celebrity circles, a 17-acre retreat where Diddy has hosted some of his most exclusive and private gatherings for years. The courtroom was already filled to capacity with media representatives and legal observers positioned to document every moment of this high-profile case. But no one was prepared for what appeared on the screens when the prosecution began playing the footage. Nobody expected this level of detailed surveillance. The room fell completely silent as the first clips began. Eyes widened, not just at the content, but at the sheer comprehensiveness of the security system. Every angle of the property appeared to be covered: entrances, pathways, beach areas, pool decks, and most surprisingly, interior spaces, including bedrooms, bathrooms, and what prosecutors identified as private entertainment areas. Until that moment, Diddy had maintained the same controlled composure he'd displayed since the trial began. His designer suits, perfect posture, and impassive expression had become a constant in the proceedings, but something changed the instant the footage appeared. His body language transformed from confident to panicked in seconds. He wasn't watching the events unfold on screen as a defendant prepared by his attorneys. He was reacting like a man seeing his most closely guarded secrets exposed without warning. First came disbelief, his eyes widening, head shaking slightly as if denying what he was seeing. Then urgent whispered conversations with his legal team. Finally, what reporters in the gallery described as physical distress: his complexion, ashen hands, trembling visibly. His usually impeccable appearance suddenly disheveled as he repeatedly wiped sweat from his face. The judge eventually called a recess after Diddy's legal team forcefully argued they had not been properly informed about the extent of this evidence, but the damage to their client's demeanor and, potentially, his case had already been done. For the first time since proceedings began, Diddy left the courtroom looking not like a powerful music mogul, but like someone whose carefully constructed world was collapsing around him. "I've covered trials for 20 years, one veteran court reporter told me during the recess, and I've never seen someone's demeanor change so dramatically. It wasn't just concern, it was panic. Complete panic." When proceedings resumed, the prosecutor made the significance of this evidence clear. "What you are about to see is not how Mr. Combs wanted to be perceived by the public. This is how he actually behaved when he believed no one who mattered would ever see the footage." It started like any other day of the trial. The room buzzed with low conversations. The press prepared their notes and lawyers organized their documents as they waited for the judge to enter. Diddy sat with his defense team reviewing papers and occasionally nodding as his attorneys leaned in with whispered advice. But when the prosecutor stood and announced, "Your Honor, the United States would like to introduce evidence item 347B, security footage obtained from the defendant's private property in the U.S. Virgin Islands," the room changed. You could hear a pin drop. Diddy's head snapped up, his expression shifting from professional attention to unmistakable alarm. The judge raised an eyebrow, and Diddy's lead attorney immediately rose to object. Your Honor, we were not provided adequate notice about this specific evidence. We request a sidebar immediately. The sidebar lasted nearly 15 minutes, with animated gestures from both legal teams. When they returned to their tables, the judge addressed the courtroom. After consideration, I'm going to allow this evidence. The prosecution provided sufficient notice under discovery rules, even if the defense did not appreciate the significance of this material until now. Diddy leaned forward, whispering urgently to his attorney, who placed a restraining hand on his client's arm, a gesture not lost on the jury. Before playing the footage, the prosecution called a witness, FBI Special Agent Catherine Morrison, who specialized in digital evidence recovery. Agent Morrison, please explain to the court how this footage was obtained. The prosecutor began, after the oath was administered. In March of this year, following execution of a search warrant on multiple properties owned by the defendant, our team discovered a sophisticated security system at his residence in the Virgin Islands. Morrison explained. This system maintained cloud backups of all footage for a period of 3 years. She described how the security setup had been installed by a private contractor specializing in ultra-high net worth clients. The system was designed with redundancies to prevent data loss even when footage was deleted from the primary servers. Backup copies remained in encrypted cloud storage that Mr. Combs apparently didn't know existed. According to Agent Morrison, the contractor had included this feature without explicitly informing Diddy, considering it standard practice for security systems of this caliber. In his statement to our team, the security contractor indicated that Mr. Combs was primarily concerned with being able to monitor his property remotely and ensuring no unauthorized recordings could be made. He paid less attention to the data retention policies. This explanation drew a visible reaction from Diddy, who closed his eyes briefly and shook his head. The most significant revelation came when Agent Morrison explained the extent of the surveillance. The system included 147 separate cameras covering virtually every area of the 17-acre property. What makes this unusual, even for high security estates, was the concentration of cameras in private interior spaces. When asked to elaborate, Morrison's testimony became more specific. Most security systems focus on perimeter protection entrances, grounds, approach points. This system certainly included those areas, but also featured multiple cameras in bedrooms, bathrooms, spa areas, and what was labeled in the system as the entertainment pavilion. The coverage in these interior spaces was comprehensive, with overlapping angles that left essentially no blind spots. The prosecutor then asked the critical question. In your professional experience, Agent Morrison, is this type of comprehensive interior surveillance typical of residential security systems, even for high-profile individuals? No, she replied, firmly. It's highly unusual. In my 15 years investigating digital evidence, I've never seen a private residence with this level of interior surveillance. The bedroom and bathroom surveillance created a foundation almost unheard of, even in establishing that this wasn't standard security footage, but something far more deliberate and unusual. As screens throughout the courtroom were prepared to display the evidence, the prosecutor addressed the jury directly. What you're about to see was recorded in a place where Mr. Combs believed he had absolute privacy and control, where he believed the only copies of this footage were ones he personally controlled, where he felt free to be his authentic self. The prosecutor paused, allowing the significance to settle across the courtroom. The events you will witness took place during what Mr. Combs called his exclusive gatherings, invitation-only events held several times a year on his private island. The guests included celebrities, musicians, athletes, and others seeking to maintain or enhance their relationship with Mr. Combs. Pay particular attention to the power dynamics at play, who gives instructions, who receives them, and what happens to those who don't comply immediately. As the lights dimmed slightly to improve screen visibility, Diddy's attorney made one final objection, which was overruled. The first footage began to play, time-stamped from July 2021, showing an aerial view of the entire property before zooming in on the main house. The entire courtroom leaned forward, attention fixed on the screens. No one was looking at Diddy anymore, except for one junior member of the prosecution team, who later told reporters that the moment the footage began, Diddy's face showed something beyond concern or anger. It was recognition. The prosecutor would later say, off the record, the look of someone seeing the moment their carefully constructed world begins to collapse. The footage you are about to see spans from 2019 to early 2023. The prosecutor explained as the first video began playing. We've selected representative samples from hundreds of hours of surveillance, focusing on patterns of behavior that directly relate to the charges before this court. The initial clips appeared relatively innocuous, aerial views of the island, guests arriving by boat and private helicopter, staff preparing elaborate settings for what appeared to be exclusive parties. But even these establishing shots revealed something telling about Diddy's private domain. Note the security personnel stationed throughout the property. The prosecutor directed particularly their positioning not just at entry points to prevent intrusion but at exit points as well. This island wasn't just protected from people coming in. It was designed to control who could leave and when. As the footage continued, it began to focus on specific events gatherings that prosecutors identified as private parties, held approximately every 3 months. The surveillance showed the arrival of guests, many with faces recognizable to anyone familiar with entertainment, sports, and business. Pay attention to what happens upon arrival, the prosecutor instructed. The footage showed each guest being escorted to a welcome area where they surrendered their phones and other electronic devices. Most complied readily, but one sequence showed a female guest hesitating. The surveillance captured her reluctance, followed by Diddy personally approaching her, speaking closely into her ear. Her body language transformed immediately from reluctance to compliance as she handed over her devices. What you just witnessed, the prosecutor explained, is the first layer of control. No means of outside communication, no ability to document what occurred on the island. But it was the next sequence that caused the first audible reactions in the courtroom. The footage shifted to interior spaces, specifically to common areas where guests mingled before the main events. The cameras captured conversations with crystal clarity, including one between Diddy and a man identified as his head of security. "The bathrooms are ready," Diddy could be heard asking. "All set. Like the last time," the security chief confirmed. "The feeds are private only to my personal server. Yes, no one else has access." The prosecutor paused the footage. Mr. Combs believed he had exclusive access to all surveillance. He believed these conversations would never be heard by anyone but him. As the footage resumed, the events depicted became increasingly concerning. Guests were shown being directed to different areas of the compound, some clearly inebriated or disoriented. Several clips showed what prosecutors described as vetting conversations. Diddy or his security personnel isolated certain guests, questioning them about their connections, their discretion, and explicitly their willingness to participate fully. "Watch what happens to guests who express reservations," the prosecutor noted. The footage showed several instances where guests who appeared hesitant were taken to a separate building identified in property records as a meditation center. Inside, the cameras captured conversations that prosecutors characterized as coercive reassurance, a mixture of pressure, implied threats about career consequences, and offers of special opportunities. One exchange between Diddy and a young female artist was played in its entirety. "You know how many people want to be where you are right now," Diddy could be heard saying. "This is how the real decisions get made in this industry. This is where I decide who's family and who's just another person trying to make it. I didn't realize it would be like this." The woman responded, her discomfort evident. "Like what? This is just us being real with each other. No facades, no pretending." Diddy's tone remained calm but carried an unmistakable edge. "But if you're not comfortable being real with me, that's a problem for our future business together. That's a problem for the contract we just signed." The woman's expression changed as the implication became clear. "No, I want to be here. I just needed a minute." "Good, because people who leave early aren't invited back. And in this business, not being invited back means a lot more than missing a good party, understand?" She nodded, and Diddy's demeanor instantly warmed as he guided her back toward the main house. As this exchange played, courtroom reporters noted that several jurors glanced at Diddy, whose complexion had noticeably paled. His attorneys were frantically writing notes, occasionally trying to engage him, but he appeared fixated on the screens, his usual poise completely abandoned. The footage then shifted to what prosecutors identified as the main events of these gatherings. Here, the judge instructed that certain portions would be shown only to the jury, attorneys, and court officers, with public screens temporarily disabled due to the sensitive nature of the content. During this private viewing, which lasted approximately 20 minutes, those observing the non-public monitors displayed reactions ranging from shock to visible distress. 2 jurors requested brief breaks, which the judge granted. Diddy's lead attorney repeatedly attempted to approach the bench, but was instructed to remain seated until the sequence concluded. When the public feed resumed, the prosecutor addressed the content that had been privately viewed. "What the jury has just witnessed establishes a clear pattern of behavior, directly relevant to the charges of human trafficking, coercion, and creating an environment of control and exploitation." The footage shows Mr. Combs not as a participant in consensual adult activities, as the defense has characterized, but as the orchestrator of situations designed to compromise, control, and ultimately exploit those seeking his professional approval. The most damaging sequence came next, footage showing the aftermath of these events. Cameras captured Diddy in what appeared to be a private office, reviewing the very surveillance being shown in court. In the footage, he was seen with his security chief identifying specific guests and giving instructions. "This one," Diddy said. "Make sure we have everything on her. The contract negotiations start next week. Already downloaded to your private server," the security chief confirmed. "And him," Diddy indicated another guest. "He got too comfortable. Started asking questions about who else was there. Might be a problem. Keep the footage ready. Let's see if his attitude improves after our meeting tomorrow. This exchange clearly establishing the surveillance as a tool for manipulation and control caused a visible reaction from several jurors. One older woman on the jury briefly closed her eyes, while another juror, a middle-aged man, shook his head slightly, his expression hardening. As this critical sequence played, Diddy finally broke completely. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders visibly shaking. His lead attorney placed a hand on his back, leaning in to whisper something. But Diddy shook his head sharply without looking up. The prosecutor allowed the impact of this evidence to settle across the courtroom before delivering the final contextual piece. Mr. Combs believed this footage was his insurance policy against those who might speak out. Instead, it has become the evidence that most clearly demonstrates the premeditated, systematic nature of his actions. The next sequence of footage revealed what prosecutors described as the aftermath system surveillance, showing how guests were managed after these events. The cameras captured Diddy and his inner circle conducting what appeared to be assessment meetings, reviewing each guest's behavior and determining next steps. She was compliant. No issues, a staff member reported in one clip, referencing a female guest who had departed earlier that day. Good move forward with the collaboration. We discussed, Diddy instructed. He expressed concerns about the NDAs, wanted his lawyer to review them again. The same staff member said about a male guest. Diddy's expression hardened visibly. Put the Vegas project on hold. Let him sit for a month, then I'll call personally to remind him how this works. The prosecutor paused the footage. What you're witnessing is not the typical follow-up to a social gathering. This is a systematic evaluation of compliance and the assignment of either rewards or consequences. The footage continued, showing more explicitly how this system operated. In one particularly disturbing sequence, Diddy was seen reviewing surveillance highlights with a team member identified as his digital security consultant. Can you isolate just this section? Diddy asked, indicating something on a monitor not visible in the camera angle. Already done, the consultant replied. Edited as requested, just the compromising parts. Nothing that shows the setup or any indication that consent might have been impaired. Perfect. Store the original in my private archive. Keep this version ready if we need leverage. This explicit discussion of manipulating footage for potential leverage caused several jurors to exchange glances. The implication was unmistakable. The evidence presentation continued. The footage revealed how this control extended far beyond the island itself. Surveillance from Diddy's mainland properties showed meetings with individuals who had previously been guests at island events. The contrast in power dynamics was stark. Formerly confident industry figures now appeared deferential, readily agreeing to business terms, contract adjustments, and participation in projects they had previously declined. Note the change in demeanor, the prosecutor directed during one such sequence. This individual had rejected Mr. Combs' business proposal 3 weeks before attending the island gathering. Here, just 2 weeks after the event, he's not only accepting the same terms he previously refused, but offering additional concessions without prompting. Perhaps the most damning pattern emerged in footage showing how those who resisted this control were handled. The surveillance captured multiple instances of what prosecutors termed escalating enforcement, beginning with subtle reminders of the island events, progressing to explicit references to recorded material, and culminating in direct threats to personal and professional reputations. One sequence showed Diddy in his New York office speaking with someone on speakerphone. I'm disappointed, Diddy said, his tone measured but cold. After everything we shared at the island, I thought we had an understanding. I can't just pull my client from a confirmed project. The voice on the phone responded, tension evident. There are contracts in place. Contracts can be broken. Careers too. Diddy's reply came without hesitation. Maybe we need to review some memories together. I have them stored very clearly. A long pause followed before the voice responded, noticeably subdued. Let me see what I can do. After this call, the footage showed Diddy turning to an assistant present in the room. Make sure he receives a secure link to selected highlights from his last visit. Just a reminder of our friendship. The prosecutor again paused the playback. This is not business negotiation. This is not industry networking. This is textbook blackmail and coercion, using material obtained through the surveillance system you've been seeing throughout this evidence. The pattern extended to how Diddy handled those who attempted to distance themselves entirely from his orbit. The footage showed multiple instances of what one staff member referred to as recovery operations, coordinated efforts to prevent individuals from speaking about their experiences. In one particularly explicit example, Diddy was seen directing his team regarding someone who had begun declining all invitations after attending an island event. I don't care if he's focusing on family or whatever excuse he's giving, Diddy instructed. No one just walks away. Find out what he cares about most and make sure he understands the cost of forgetting his friends. As this section of evidence concluded, the prosecutor addressed the broader significance. What you've witnessed is not a series of isolated incidents, but a methodical system of control. Mr. Combs created an environment where attendance at these private gatherings was first presented as an exclusive privilege, then leveraged as a source of compromise and control. The surveillance system was not designed for security, but for documentation that could later be used to ensure compliance. Throughout this portion of the evidence presentation, Diddy's demeanor continued to deteriorate. Court observers noted that he appeared physically ill, repeatedly requesting water and at one point asking his attorney if he could be excused. The judge denied this request, requiring him to remain present as the evidence continued. The prosecution's evidence presentation reached a critical turning point when they introduced what they called the insurance files, surveillance footage showing Diddy explicitly discussing how to handle potential threats to his system of control. In footage timestamped January 2022, Diddy was seen in his island office with 3 members of his inner circle, identified as his head of security, personal attorney, and digital security consultant. The conversation, captured with perfect clarity by the hidden cameras, revolved around concerns that someone might come forward with allegations. The problem isn't just what they might say, Diddy explained to the group. It's that others might find the courage to follow. We need to make an example that reminds everyone of the consequences. The footage showed his team presenting options ranging from financial settlements with stringent NDAs to more concerning approaches involving intimidation and threats. Diddy listened carefully before responding. Money creates paper trails. Threats can be reported. We need something cleaner. He turned to the digital security consultant. Show them what we have, not everything, just enough, so they understand what complete exposure would mean for them. Make it personal. Make it about their family finding out, their children seeing it, their church community learning details. The consultant nodded. I've already compiled personalized packages for anyone we consider. Each contains enough to devastate them professionally and personally, but nothing that directly implicates you in any improper behavior. This explicit strategy session continued with Diddy and his team reviewing specific individuals. They considered potential liabilities for each. They discussed leveraging the surveillance footage to ensure continued silence. Remember, Diddy instructed, the goal isn't just to keep them quiet, it's to make them understand that staying in my good graces is the only acceptable option. The prosecutor paused the footage. What you've just witnessed is Mr. Combs and his team deliberately planning to use this surveillance footage as a weapon against those who might speak out. This isn't speculation about intent, it's explicit confirmation from Mr. Combs himself. As this damning evidence played, Diddy's composure completely collapsed. Court reporters described him as ashen and visibly shaken, at one point leaning heavily on the defense table as if struggling to remain upright. His attorneys appeared equally disturbed, their usual confident objections replaced by stunned silence. The evidence presentation continued with what prosecutors described as the escalation phase. Footage from 2022 and early 2023 showing Diddy becoming increasingly concerned about potential legal exposure. In one clip from September 2022, he was seen instructing his team to increase security measures and screening procedures for island events. We need to be absolutely certain about everyone who sets foot on this property. Full background checks, verification of what they have to lose, confirmation of their understanding of the expectations. This heightened paranoia coincided with the first public allegations against other powerful entertainment figures in the wake of various accountability movements. The footage showed Diddy closely monitoring these developments, at one point explicitly discussing the changing climate with his attorney. People are talking now who never would have dared before, Diddy observed, his concern evident. The old methods of handling problems aren't working like they used to. All the more reason to be cautious about who gets invited moving forward, his attorney advised, and to strengthen our insurance on those who already have been. By early 2023, the surveillance showed Diddy taking unprecedented steps to contain potential threats. One particularly disturbing sequence captured him reviewing what his team called loyalty assessments, detailed reports on past guests, including their current vulnerabilities, pressure points, and recommended approaches for ensuring continued silence. For anyone showing even minimal risk, implement preemptive reminders, Diddy instructed. Don't wait for them to consider speaking out. Make sure they understand we're still paying attention, that the material still exists, that the consequences haven't changed. The breaking point came in footage from March 2023, just weeks before the first federal raids on Diddy's properties. The surveillance captured a late-night meeting where his digital security consultant delivered alarming news. Someone accessed the backup server, not the decoy one. We let people know about the actual secure archive. Diddy's reaction was immediate and visceral. That's impossible. Nobody has those credentials except me. The logs show unusual activity. Someone either has your access information or managed to bypass security protocols. The footage showed Diddy's rare moment of visible panic. Shut it down. All of it. That's the problem, the consultant replied hesitantly. The system is designed with redundancies that prevent complete deletion without a complex process. If someone has already copied files, erasing our copies won't help. This revelation visibly devastated Diddy, in perhaps the most humanizing moment of the entire surveillance footage. He was seen alone after the meeting, sitting in apparent shock, repeatedly whispering, "It's all over." The prosecutor allowed this final clip to conclude before addressing the jury directly. What you've witnessed is the moment Mr. Combs realized his system of surveillance and control might be exposed. Not concern about false allegations, not worry about misunderstandings, but the raw panic of someone who knows exactly what they've done and what the evidence will show. The final segment of surveillance evidence focused on the immediate aftermath of Diddy's realization that his security system might have been compromised. The footage, timestamped just 2 weeks before the first federal raids, showed a series of increasingly desperate attempts to contain potential damage. In one sequence, Diddy was seen instructing his team to implement what they called Operation Clean Slate, an urgent effort to remove all traces of the surveillance system while preserving what he called necessary insurance. "We need to be strategic," Diddy told his assembled inner circle, his usually confident demeanor replaced by tense urgency. "The system needs to disappear, but we can't lose the leverage it gives us. Select the most critical files, transfer them to secure storage with no connection to me, then dismantle everything else." The footage showed his digital security consultant raising concerns. "Completely erasing the system will take time. There are physical components throughout the property, server infrastructure, cloud backups with third-party storage. We can't guarantee complete removal without at least 2 weeks of methodical work." Diddy's response revealed his escalating panic. "We don't have 2 weeks, we might not have 2 days. Get it done faster." What followed was surveillance capturing round-the-clock efforts to dismantle cameras, remove servers, and delete digital files. The irony that these very efforts were being recorded by the system they were attempting to erase was not lost on the jury, several of whom shook their heads at the futility of the operation. Perhaps the most damning segment showed Diddy personally reviewing what his team called priority insurance files, selecting which surveillance clips to preserve for potential leverage despite the risk of discovery. "These are the ones that matter," he instructed, indicating several folders on a secure laptop. "These people could cause real damage if they decided to talk. Everything else can go." The prosecutor paused the footage to highlight this critical moment. Mr. Combs wasn't concerned about protecting privacy or correcting an overzealous security system. He was deliberately preserving material he believed would allow him to continue controlling and silencing others even as he recognized the legal peril of maintaining such files. The final surveillance clip presented to the court captured what prosecutors described as the last meeting, a gathering of Diddy's core team, just 3 days before federal agents executed search warrants on his properties. The footage showed Diddy instructing his team on a coordinated response strategy. "If anything happens, investigations, allegations, whatever, we all have the same story." The security system was standard for a high-profile property. Any recordings were routine, temporary, and automatically deleted after 30 days. No one ever watched them. No one ever used them for any purpose. "We stick to that no matter what." His attorney, visible in the footage, appeared uncomfortable. "We need to be careful about instructing people on specific statements that could be construed as what?" Diddy interrupted sharply. "As trying to protect ourselves from people who want to destroy everything we've built. Everyone in this room has benefited from how I operate. Everyone in this room has been protected by these systems, and everyone in this room will go down if I do." The threat implicit in these words hung in the surveillance footage, a moment of raw honesty capturing Diddy, not as the charismatic music mogul, but as someone recognizing that his elaborate system of control might be collapsing. As this final clip concluded, the prosecutor addressed the jury directly. "What you've witnessed throughout this evidence is not speculative. It's not subject to interpretation. It's Mr. Combs in his own words, in what he believed were his most private moments, explicitly confirming every element of the charges before you." The prosecutor then turned toward Diddy, who remained slumped at the defense table, unable to maintain his previously confident posture. "Mr. Combs created an elaborate system to record others at their most vulnerable, never imagining he was simultaneously creating the most damning record of his own actions. He weaponized surveillance against others, only to find himself ultimately exposed by the very system he designed." Throughout this final presentation, Diddy appeared completely defeated. Court observers noted that he barely consulted with his attorneys, instead staring downward, occasionally closing his eyes as particularly damning clips played on the courtroom screens. When the prosecution finally concluded their presentation, the judge called an immediate recess. As jurors filed out, many avoided looking in Diddy's direction, their expressions reflecting the weight of what they had witnessed. When court resumed after the recess, the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. What had been a high-profile but procedurally routine trial had transformed into something prosecutors would later describe as a case study in how power corrupts and how technology enables that corruption. Diddy, who had entered the courthouse that morning projecting his trademark confidence, left the day's proceedings escorted by his legal team, his posture stooped, his designer suit looking suddenly ill-fitting on his diminished frame. Security created a protective barrier around him as he walked to his vehicle, shielding him from the barrage of questions shouted by waiting reporters. His lead attorney made only a brief statement. What the public saw today was carefully selected and presented without proper context. When we present our case, a very different picture will emerge, but the attorney's typically authoritative delivery was undercut by an uncertainty that reporters immediately noted the voice of someone trying to project confidence while recognizing the devastating impact of the day's evidence. Inside legal circles, the reaction was swift and unequivocal. Former federal prosecutors appearing on legal analysis programs described the surveillance evidence as the kind of material that ends deliberations before they begin, and as close to a smoking gun as you'll ever see in a complex case. When a defendant is captured on video explicitly discussing the criminal acts they are charged with, creating systems to facilitate those acts, and acknowledging the illegal nature of their behavior, there's very little left for a defense team to work with, explained one former U.S. attorney. The jury doesn't need to infer intent or piece together fragmented evidence. They heard and saw the defendant in his own words, believing no one would ever witness these moments. The impact extended far beyond the courthouse. Within hours, companies and organizations with ties to Diddy began issuing statements distancing themselves from the embattled music mogul. Charitable foundations announced the removal of his name from programs and buildings. Former business associates released carefully worded statements, expressing shock and disappointment at the revelations. Perhaps most tellingly, numerous celebrities who had previously been regular guests at Diddy's events suddenly went dark on social media, their representatives declining all requests for comment on the case. Industry insiders described a wave of panic sweeping through entertainment circles as people questioned whether they too might appear in unreleased portions of the surveillance footage. Legal experts predicted that the day's evidence would have implications far beyond Diddy's individual case. What we witness today raises profound questions about surveillance, power, and accountability in private spaces. Noted a prominent legal scholar, this case may well establish new precedents for how courts handle evidence obtained through comprehensive surveillance systems installed by defendants themselves. As night fell on the courthouse, a small group of silent protesters gathered, holding signs with messages like, "Believe victims and no one is above accountability." Their quiet presence represented a stark contrast to the media frenzy surrounding the case, reminded that beyond the sensational headlines lay serious allegations, with real human impact. For Diddy himself, court observers speculated that the day's proceedings likely marked a point of no return. As one veteran legal correspondent put it, in high-profile cases, there's often a single moment that defines the entire trial, a piece of evidence or testimony so powerful that everything else becomes secondary. Today was that moment. What those surveillance cameras captured wasn't just damaging to Diddy's legal defense, it shattered the entire persona he spent decades constructing. The technical aspects of the security system itself became a subject of intense discussion among privacy and technology experts. The comprehensive nature of the surveillance, covering every corner of the property with no apparent boundaries between public and intimate spaces, represented what one digital rights advocate called a dystopian level of monitoring that should concern everyone, regardless of their opinion on this specific case. What's particularly disturbing, noted a cybersecurity expert interviewed outside the courthouse, is that this system was designed with multiple redundancies specifically to prevent the footage from ever being deleted. This wasn't casual. Recording it was methodical documentation designed to create permanent leverage. As this story continues to develop, questions remain about how much more surveillance footage exists, who else might be captured in it, and what other private spaces owned by powerful figures might contain similar systems of observation and control. The case has prompted calls for new legislation addressing private surveillance systems and how the evidence they generate can be used both by and against those who install them. The most profound impact, however, may be on public perception of celebrity privacy claims. After today, remarked one cultural commentator, any celebrity who expresses outrage about privacy violations while maintaining properties with hidden cameras has lost all credibility. This case has exposed not just one individual's actions, but an entire system where surveillance was weaponized against the very people who were invited into supposedly safe spaces. For the jury who will ultimately decide Diddy's fate, the day's evidence appeared to have a profound effect. Court reporters noted that as jurors filed out for the day, several appeared visibly troubled by what they had witnessed. One juror was observed wiping away tears, while another shook his head repeatedly as if trying to process the disturbing nature of the footage. If you found this report informative, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for continuing coverage. As this landmark case progresses, we'll continue to bring you the latest developments as they unfold, providing context and analysis that goes beyond the headlines. The age of unchecked power protected by surveillance and silence appears to be coming to an end, not with carefully crafted statements or public relations strategies, but with the unblinking eye of the very cameras meant to protect that.